Let's take a look at some of the tools you'll be using for your oral history project. First, of course, you'll be doing some research on the internet. Next, you'll probably be using iMovie to capture your video. And third, you need somewhere to be putting down all of your resources and your references. So let's get started there. First thing I suggest is creating a folder on your desktop called Oral History Project. That way, as you start collecting pictures or artifacts, you can put those right in that folder and you always know where things are. Next, I suggest starting a file called Oral History Project References or Resources. So what I've done is created an Oral History Resources document in TextEdit. It's simple, easy, doesn't take up much space on my computer, and I can just paste in the links. As you see, I've got two up here already, as you find things on the internet. And that's an easy way for you to reference those links as you're doing research, plus you can add those at the end of your presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's take a look at some examples. Here you can see both people in the shot, the interviewer and the interviewee. This would be a more effective shot if the camera was a little tighter on the interviewee and the pictures were put in over his voice. In other words, you would have to take a photo of them or scan those photographs in. However, this is a nice shot because at least you can see both people, but they're looking down instead of looking at the camera. And the camera can't actually tell what those pictures are. In this next picture, you can see the gentleman being interviewed is a World War II vet, although he's being backlit. Backlit is what happens when a light, or in this case a window, is behind your subject, casting a shadow on their face. This would be a fine shot if they also had front lighting, or what's called a key light, where the light was shining on his face. Here's a good example of what happens if you set your camera a little too high. Notice that you can tell obviously the camera is higher than she is. It's hard for her to make eye contact with the camera or the person doing the interviewing. This shot would have been great if the laptop or the camera had been placed on that desk. However, sadly the camera is placed below the desk, and the desk and that yellow coffee mug are between the camera and the person being interviewed. In this last example of what not to do, you'll notice the subject is harshly lit on the left and the right, which is very distracting. To review, there are a few things you need to keep in mind. 1. Make sure your camera is close to your subject. 2. You should be sitting next to the laptop. And remember, the microphone is on the side of your MacBook Air. 3. You want to make sure you have a good light source. In this image, you can actually see there's two light sources, one on the right of the person doing the interview and one on the left of the camera. Now let's take a look at some good examples. In this picture, you can tell the person being interviewed is nice and close to the camera. She's looking at the interviewer, and she seems really comfortable. In addition, she has a nice plain background, and she's wearing something that stands out on the film. The next picture you can see is you can actually tell how far away she is from the camera. Notice the camera's right there on a tripod. In this case, they're using a flip camera. And you can see the empty chair, that's where the interviewer would be sitting. And she's looking at them and not the camera. The next two examples we'll take a look at are of these two gentlemen. First, notice that neither of them are looking directly at the camera. The one on the top is clearly looking at the interviewer. The one on the bottom is looking a little bit more closely toward the camera, but still facing the person who's doing the interviewing. Both are on the left side of the frame, which makes it really easy to do that picture-in-picture effect. The only issue I have with either of these is the one on the bottom. You notice there's a reflection in the glass. When you're filming, be very aware of glass and mirrors, as the reflection can often have a negative effect. The last example I'd like to share is for those of you who might be doing an interview with someone who is not local. In the past, students have used Skype or Google Hangouts to interview someone who might even be overseas. In this case, what I suggest is running QuickTime and doing a screen recording. Once you're ready to record, you'll need to launch iMovie. Once you launch iMovie, go up here to File and New Project. At this point, you'll want to name your project OHP, or Oral History Project, OHP, and I suggest putting your name in. After that, hit Create, and that'll create your project. It'll give you a space to work. If you think you might be importing some video footage, what you'll need to do is go up here to File and create a new event. The event is the only place that you can add video footage. If you're just adding stills, you can do that down here in the project. But if you're going to import video, it has to happen up here into the event, and you can drag it down here to the project. So up here in my new event, I'm going to title this OHP. Something else to consider is the audio quality. So before you start recording, I suggest going up here to the Apple and going to System Preferences. Once you're in System Preferences, you'll want to look at the sound settings. In sound, you'll be able to check the input settings. Notice I have my microphone turned up pretty high, I believe about 92%. And so you might want to test it, set things up, have the subject talk a little bit, and practice your interview. If it's too quiet, turn it up. If they're a little loud, you might even want to turn it down. This is where by default, it should be about in the middle by default. I tend to like to keep mine up a little high. Now, the next thing you'll do is you'll activate the camera in iMovie. Here it'll be using your FaceTime camera, and you want it to look something like this. Obviously, this isn't me, but this is just a good example of what it should look like. So, once you're ready, hit Capture. Okay, so once you have your interview into iMovie, and it's ready to go in the OHP event folder, obviously this isn't the interview that I just shot, but we're going to pretend that this is what we're working with. A couple things you'll notice here, just as I scrub across the video, you notice I have a nice title here. This is the person doing the interviewing. It's not important to show yourself. However, it is important to set things up. So you've got a title, who's doing the interviewing, who you're actually interviewing, and notice the setup here. So she's not perfectly centered in the frame. That's perfect. She's what you would call in the upper left third of the frame. When you're thinking of shooting, you should think of the rule of thirds, and I'll show you a graphic. Okay, so here is showing what the rule of thirds means. Ideally, you want the person's head in one of these quadrants, like where the lines intersect. Okay, so back to the video. Now, notice as she's talking, this is great. Your interviewees talking. If you choose to cut away, stop the interview, and then have them show an artifact, that's perfectly fine. That's great. If it's a still image, you'll want to put that in afterwards and put it in over their talking, and I can show you how to do that. I'll do that in iMovie in just a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab some of this video so we can start editing it. Another thing I really liked is, here's an example. So I'm going to take that clip, this down to about here. We'll work with that 45-second clip. So I'm going to drop it down here, drag and drop in iMovie. Most of you should know that. I'm going to go ahead and hit change because I want it to match. Now, notice there's a tiny little clip on the left. I need to zoom in a little. 46 seconds. I'm going to uncheck this so the audio goes away. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit with this slider. So now it's showing 5 seconds for each one of these frames here. I'm also going to uncheck this little box. So it'll now, as I zoom in, it'll start to wrap around. The other thing I'll show you is, you won't be able to see it on this video recording, but under iMovie, if you click in the top left and you click on Preferences, you want to check this Show Advanced Tools. You want that turned on, and I'll show you why in a few minutes. Okay, so you have your video in here. I love the way this title is put in. If you'd like to do that title, really, it's not difficult. iMovie has lots of titles built in. They're called bottom thirds. Get down here, and it's very easy. You drag your title up, you put it on top. If you just want it on part of the video, my suggestion is put it at the end. Put in your title. I'm going to say this is Grandma Sue, and she was World War II, a World War II wife. She was not obviously fighting in World War II, but her husband did. So, and again, I'm just making that up. So here's that title, and maybe I want to put it here. So there's my title, it comes up. And I'm actually going to clip out this beginning part because I don't want their title in. So let's take that right there. I want to split this. If you want to split video, the easiest thing to do is if you click it once and you want to grab this handle, you can trim off the front or back. So let me show you how that works. Click and drag. I'm going to trim off the front all the way until that title goes away. And now you can just hit Command B or go up here and edit, and you want to trim to selection. I'm sorry, clip and trim to selection. See, it says Command B, so I'm going to hit trim to selection. Great, so I clipped off the front, and now if I play it, it comes up with my title. That's great. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to put in some still images and a few other things. So let's assume here she's talking about the plane her husband flew and the kind of aircraft carrier he was on. So what makes your oral history project really interesting is when you're able to cut away from them speaking and show an image. Another easy way to do that is to use picture-in-picture. I'll show you how that works. First, you'll need to pull up your file, which you already made a folder, and it should be your oral history folder. So notice here's my oral history project folder sitting on my desktop, and here's the aircraft photo. So I'm just going to take that photo and drag it right down here. I'm going to put it right here. It's going to give me some options. Replace, well, that'll replace the video. Insert cutaway. Cutaway is when I'll show you. It'll cut away from her. Notice it's gray down here. So the video will keep going, her voice will keep going, and that'll be a picture. And then it'll automatically cut right back to her. That is absolutely the easiest way to do it. Let's say you want to do a picture-in-picture. Let me do it again. Find her. Take that same aircraft picture, and I'll do it over here this time. So now I'm going to choose picture-in-picture. And this is really neat because now I'd put it up here, and you can move it. So maybe I want it down here in the bottom left, bottom right, bottom left, top. I kind of like this top right. Notice she shifted her position a little bit. She's a little bit more centered now. So remember, as you're filming, you want to try to keep them ideally kind of this left area. And then that gives you the right for those picture-in-picture moments. So if I do this, now you'll watch. It pops up. And as she's talking about the aircraft, then it can go away. You want it there longer? No problem. You can just double click and increase the length. Okay, you can add some video effects. You can put a dissolve in. All of these things make it just a little bit more professional looking. You can even add a white frame around it, and then you can see here what it does. It adds a little frame, or a black frame, a gray frame. Okay, dots. You can be creative. You can even add a drop shadow. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit done. Great, so that's adding artifacts or pictures while they're talking. Okay, you can do the same thing with video. If there's a video that you want to drop in on top of the video, or next to the video, or cutaway, absolutely no problem. Okay, let's say you need to adjust the audio. Let's take a look at that now. Down here in the bottom, you notice I just pressed this button, brings up the audio track. This audio track is showing the waveforms, the up and down of the person's voice. As I zoom in, you get even more detail, or more detailed view. And let's say something happens and you need to bring the audio down in a specific area, or up for that matter. So right here, notice her audio is really low. And I want to bring that up. So I'm going to click once, creates this little yellow box. I'm going to slide the little box, I'm going to select the area I want, and that audio all needs to go up a little. I'm going to click right here, and I'm going to drag that up. And see now how it matches a little bit? Now it's louder. And here, right here, it's really loud. So I'll do the same thing. I'll click and drag over this, and I'll even be a little bit more specific and grab just that area. Maybe that was a dog barking, or they sneezed or something. You can then bring that down. And it matches the rest of the project a little bit better. The last step to all this is making sure that you export your file properly. Once you finish the project, you go up here to Share and Export Movie. You might have lots of options, especially if you filmed with a different camera. Most of the time we ask you to choose medium. Medium size gives you lots of options for playback, and make sure you name it either with OHP and your last name, or possibly your teacher's name. Just make sure you name it in a way that you can find it. So OHP. And for this example, I'm just going to put it on the desktop and hit export. That'll start the exporting process. It could take a few minutes, especially if your interview is 10 or 15 or 20 minutes long. It'll definitely take a long time to export. And then once the exporting process is finished, that's when you'll take your file and most likely drop it into Google Drive or possibly YouTube.